Hello, beautiful soul. I'm Aurora, and welcome to Twin Flame Journey, a space where we explore the deeper meaning behind soul connections, divine timing, and the path that leads two hearts back to union. If you've been feeling the signs, you're in the right place.
There is a paradox about twin flame union that many people don't talk about, and when you first hear it, it might sound completely backwards. Union does not happen when you desperately want it. It does not happen when you are constantly thinking about them. It does not happen when you feel like you cannot live without them. In fact, twin flame union often happens at the exact moment when you stop needing them. At first glance, this idea feels confusing, maybe even unfair. After all, if someone is your twin flame, the one person who mirrors your soul, shouldn't longing for them bring you closer together? Shouldn't love, devotion, and desire be the very things that create union? But the deeper truth of the twin flame journey is far more complex than that. And the reason many people remain stuck in separation for years is because they are unknowingly holding on to the very energy that prevents union from happening. The energy of need. Think about the moment when most twin flame journeys begin. For many people, the first meeting feels magical. There is an instant recognition that cannot easily be explained. Conversations flow effortlessly. Time seems to disappear. You feel seen in a way you never have before. It feels like destiny. And in those early moments, it is easy to believe that you have finally found the missing piece of your life. Someone who completes you. Someone who fills the emptiness you may have carried for years. Someone who finally makes everything feel whole. But here is the hidden trap. The moment you begin to believe that someone else is responsible for completing you, you unknowingly place your happiness outside of yourself. You begin to rely on them emotionally. You begin to measure your peace based on their presence. And slowly, without realizing it, the connection that once felt free begins to carry a weight, a pressure, a subtle expectation that says, "Without you, I am not whole." But real twin flame union cannot grow inside that kind of energy. Because union is not about two incomplete people finding each other. It is about two whole people choosing each other. And there is a very important difference between those two states. One is based on lack. The other is based on fullness. When you need someone in order to feel complete, the relationship becomes a form of emotional survival. You begin to chase reassurance. You look for signs. You analyze every message, every silence, every shift in energy. You ask questions like, why haven't they texted me? Do they still feel the connection? Are they thinking about me? Your mind becomes occupied with them, sometimes every hour of the day. Not because you simply appreciate the connection, but because part of you fears losing it. And this fear is exactly what creates resistance in the twin flame dynamic. Many people know about the concept of the runner and the chaser in twin flame relationships. The chaser feels the connection deeply and seeks closeness. The runner feels overwhelmed by the intensity and pulls away. But what most people do not realize is that this dynamic is not simply about personality differences. It is about energetic imbalance. When one person feels like they need the other in order to feel okay, the energy of the relationship becomes heavy. It carries expectations. It carries emotional pressure, even if those expectations are never spoken out loud. On the other side, the runner often feels this pressure on a subconscious level. They may not fully understand why they feel the urge to create distance. They may even still care deeply about the connection. But something inside them feels overwhelmed. And so they step back. Not always because they do not love you, but because the energy of need feels too intense to hold. And this is where the paradox of the twin flame journey begins. The more you try to hold on to them, the further they seem to move away. The more you focus your life around the connection, the more unstable the connection becomes. The more you seek union, the longer separation lasts. At first, this can feel incredibly painful. You may wonder why something that felt so destined could suddenly become so complicated. You may question the universe. You may question the connection itself. You may even question yourself. Was it all in your head? Did you imagine the depth of what you felt? But the truth is that the twin flame journey is not designed to give you another person who completes you. It is designed to lead you back to yourself. to the version of you that existed before you believed you needed someone else in order to feel whole. Because before you met them, there was already a soul inside you capable of love, creativity, purpose, and joy. Meeting your twin flame simply reflects that power back to you. They awaken something, but they are not the source of it. This is one of the hardest truths for many people to accept. Because when the connection feels so powerful, it is natural to believe that the other person is the key to your happiness. But the deeper spiritual purpose of the twin flame journey is the opposite. It is to show you that everything you are searching for in them already exists within you. And until that realization becomes real in your life, not just intellectually but energetically, union cannot stabilize. Because union requires two people who are standing in their own wholeness, not two people trying to complete each other. Imagine two people who both feel empty inside. They come together, hoping the relationship will fill that emptiness. At first, the excitement might temporarily mask the void. But eventually, the unmet needs resurface. One person begins asking for more attention. The other feels pressured. Conflicts begin to appear. The relationship becomes unstable. Now, imagine something very different. Two people who have already done the work of healing their wounds. Two people who have built lives they genuinely enjoy. Two people who no longer depend on another person to validate their worth. When those two people meet, the relationship carries a completely different energy. There is no desperation, no emotional survival, no silent demand that the other person must stay in order for life to feel meaningful. Instead, there is freedom. And paradoxically, freedom is the very thing that allows deep connection to flourish. This is why so many twin flame stories share a similar turning point. After months, or even years of chasing the connection, something inside finally shifts. The person who once waited for messages stops checking their phone. The person who once obsessed over signs begins focusing on their own life. They start building things, creating things, exploring who they are outside of the connection. At first, this shift may not happen because they suddenly understand the spiritual lesson. Sometimes it happens simply because they are exhausted, tired of waiting, tired of hoping, tired of feeling like their happiness depends on someone else's actions. So they let go, not in anger, not in resentment, but in quiet acceptance. And this is where the energy of the journey begins to transform. Because the moment you stop needing someone to fill your emptiness, you begin discovering something surprising. The emptiness itself starts disappearing. Little by little, you realize that your life still has meaning. Your passions return. Your creativity returns. Your sense of peace begins to grow again. And as this happens, the entire energetic dynamic of the twin flame connection begins to change. Because now you are no longer seeking them from a place of lack. You are standing in your own completeness. And strangely enough, this is often the exact moment when the possibility of union finally begins to open. Not because you chased it, but because you no longer needed it. One of the most powerful beliefs people carry into the twin flame journey is the idea that somewhere in the world, there is another person who completes them. It is a belief deeply embedded in modern culture. Movies tell stories of finding your other half. Songs talk about someone being the missing piece. Even spiritual discussions sometimes describe twin flames as two halves of the same soul. At first, this idea sounds romantic, beautiful even. The thought that somewhere out there is one person perfectly designed to fill every emotional gap, heal every wound, and finally make life feel complete. But there is a quiet danger hidden inside this belief. Because the moment you start believing someone else is responsible for completing you, you unknowingly begin living from a place of lack. And lack, no matter how romantic it may appear, is not the energy that creates lasting union. Imagine someone who believes they are incomplete on their own. They carry an invisible emptiness inside them. It may come from past heartbreak, childhood wounds, loneliness, or simply the quiet feeling that something in life is missing. When they meet someone who reflects their soul deeply, someone who feels familiar, intense, and magnetic, the experience can feel overwhelming. Suddenly, that emptiness seems to disappear. The connection feels like relief. like finally breathing after holding your breath for years. And in that moment, the mind quietly forms a conclusion. This is the person who completes me. But what most people do not realize is that the feeling of completion they experience in that moment is not actually coming from the other person. It is coming from the awakening of their own heart. The twin flame connection has a unique ability to mirror the deepest parts of your soul back to you. It awakens emotions, memories, dreams, and spiritual awareness that may have been dormant for years. You feel more alive, more open, more emotionally connected to yourself. And because the other person was present when that awakening happened, it is easy to assume that they are the source of it. But they are not. They are simply the mirror. This distinction may seem subtle, but it changes everything about the journey. If you believe the other person is the source of your happiness, you will spend your energy trying to hold on to them. You will fear losing them. You will analyze their behavior. You will try to maintain the connection at all costs. Because if they leave, you believe the feeling of wholeness will disappear with them. And this belief creates a quiet form of dependency. Not always obvious, not always dramatic, but powerful enough to shape the entire dynamic of the relationship. Think about what happens when someone believes their emotional stability depends on another person. Every small action becomes meaningful. A delayed message suddenly feels like rejection. A change in tone feels like distance. Silence feels like abandonment. The mind begins searching for explanations. Did I say something wrong? Are they losing feelings? Is the connection fading? And slowly, the connection that once felt natural becomes filled with tension. Because underneath the surface, there is a constant fear of loss. The irony is that this fear often pushes the other person further away. Not because they intentionally want to create distance, but because the energy of dependency can feel overwhelming. Even when it is unspoken, even when it is subtle, the other person may start feeling responsible for emotions they cannot control. They may feel like they are expected to provide reassurance, stability, and constant presence. And for many people, that responsibility feels heavy. So they pull back, not always because they want to hurt you, but because they need space to breathe. This is why the early stages of many twin flame journeys feel like a cycle of closeness and distance. One moment the connection feels powerful and undeniable. The next moment it feels fragile and uncertain. But the deeper purpose of this cycle is not punishment. It is revelation. It is meant to show you something important about yourself. Something that may have existed long before you ever met your twin flame. The belief that you are incomplete on your own. The moment you start believing that your happiness depends on another person, you unknowingly give away your power. Your emotional state becomes tied to their behavior. Your sense of peace becomes dependent on their presence. And your identity begins to revolve around the connection. But the spiritual purpose of the twin flame journey is not to reinforce this dependency. It is to dissolve it. Because true union cannot exist between two people who feel incomplete on their own. Real union requires something very different. It requires two individuals who have already discovered their own wholeness. People who have faced their wounds. People who have learned how to create peace within themselves. People who do not need another person in order to feel worthy, loved, or alive. This is where the illusion of completion begins to dissolve. You begin realizing that the feeling of wholeness you experienced at the beginning of the connection was never truly dependent on the other person. It was the awakening of your own soul. They triggered it, but they do not own it. And this realization is both empowering and unsettling. Empowering because it means your happiness is not controlled by anyone else. Unsettling because it means you must now take responsibility for creating that happiness within yourself. You can no longer wait for someone else to rescue you from loneliness. You can no longer expect another person to heal wounds you have not yet faced. The work becomes internal. And this internal work is the true path of the twin flame journey. Not chasing, not waiting, not trying to force union, but rediscovering the parts of yourself that were lost long before the connection ever began. This process does not happen overnight. For many people, it unfolds slowly. At first, there may still be moments of longing, moments where you wish things could return to the intensity of the beginning. But over time, something inside begins to shift. You begin asking different questions. Instead of wondering, why are they pulling away? You begin asking, why do I feel incomplete without them? Instead of asking, how can I make the connection work? You begin asking, how can I build a life that feels meaningful on its own? These questions change the direction of your energy. Instead of pouring all your attention into the other person, you begin turning inward. You start exploring who you are outside of the relationship, your interests, your passions, your purpose. You begin rebuilding the parts of your life that may have been neglected while you were focused entirely on the connection. And slowly, something remarkable happens. The emptiness you once believed only they could fill begins to disappear. Not because they came back, but because you learned how to fill it yourself. You begin discovering that wholeness is not something another person gives you. It is something you cultivate within. And when that realization becomes real, not just as an idea, but as a lived experience, the entire meaning of twin flame union begins to change. Because union is no longer about finding the missing piece of your soul. It is about two complete souls recognizing each other, not out of need, but out of resonance. And that resonance can only exist when both individuals have moved beyond the illusion of completion. When they no longer seek someone to fill the void inside them. When they no longer expect another person to carry the responsibility of their happiness. Only then does the connection become free. Free from pressure. Free from dependency. Free from fear. And in that freedom, something new becomes possible. A union not built on emptiness, but on wholeness. If there is one invisible force that quietly shapes the entire twin flame journey, it is energy. Not the dramatic, mystical kind people sometimes imagine when they first hear about spiritual connections, but the subtle emotional energy we carry every day, the feelings, expectations, fears, and intentions that live beneath our words and actions. And among all these energies, there is one that has the strongest influence on whether a connection moves toward union or stays trapped in separation. That energy is need. At first, needing someone may seem like a natural part of love. Many people even see it as proof of deep connection. When someone says, "I need you," it often sounds romantic. It suggests devotion, attachment, a sense that the relationship matters deeply. But when it comes to the twin flame journey, the energy of need creates a very different dynamic than most people expect. Because need is not the same as love. Need comes from lack. Love comes from fullness. And the difference between these two energies can determine whether a connection feels free or heavy, expansive or suffocating. To understand this more clearly, imagine two different emotional states. In the first state, a person feels empty inside. They believe that without the other person, their life loses meaning. Their happiness feels fragile, constantly tied to whether the other person is present, responsive, and emotionally available. In the second state, a person already feels grounded within themselves. They have built a life that contains purpose, friendships, passions, and self-respect. The other person adds joy to their life, but they are not the source of it. Both individuals may feel love. Both may care deeply about the relationship. But the energy behind the connection is completely different. In the first scenario, the relationship carries emotional weight. There is a quiet pressure placed on the other person to maintain the sense of stability and happiness. In the second scenario, the relationship feels light. There is freedom for both people to exist as individuals without the constant fear that distance or independence will destroy the connection. Now consider how this difference plays out in the twin flame dynamic. When someone feels like they need their twin flame in order to feel complete, their mind begins to focus intensely on the connection. They check their phone repeatedly, hoping for messages. They analyze past conversations, searching for hidden meanings. They interpret every small gesture as either confirmation or rejection. And perhaps most importantly, they begin organizing their emotional world around the other person. A good day becomes a day when the twin flame responds warmly. A bad day becomes a day when there is silence or distance. The connection becomes the emotional center of their life. This pattern is extremely common during the early stages of the twin flame journey, especially for the person who feels the spiritual depth of the connection first. But what most people do not realize is that this intense focus generates a powerful energetic signal. A signal that says, "My emotional stability depends on you." Even if those words are never spoken out loud, energy communicates far beyond language. Human beings constantly sense the emotional states of others on a subconscious level. It is the reason we can sometimes walk into a room and instantly feel tension, even before anyone says a word. The same principle applies to intimate connections. When someone carries the energy of need, it often creates an invisible pressure on the other person. They may not understand exactly why they feel uncomfortable. They may still care deeply about the connection, but something inside them begins to feel overwhelmed. The relationship no longer feels like a space of freedom. It begins to feel like responsibility. And when people feel responsible for someone else's emotional stability, their instinct is often to create distance. Not necessarily because they want to hurt the other person, but because they need space to breathe. This is why the runner-chaser dynamic appears so frequently in twin flame relationships. The chaser often carries the energy of need. They feel the connection intensely and try to maintain it. The runner senses the emotional pressure and withdraws. The more the runner withdraws, the more the chaser feels panic and tries to close the distance. And this cycle can continue for months, sometimes even years. But the true lesson hidden inside this dynamic is not about convincing the runner to stay. It is about transforming the energy of need itself. Because the moment that energy begins to dissolve, the entire dynamic of the relationship starts to change. Imagine someone who has spent years feeling emotionally dependent on their twin flame. Every silence felt unbearable. Every sign of distance triggered anxiety. But over time, through self-reflection, healing, and personal growth, something inside them shifts. They begin rebuilding their life outside the connection. They reconnect with passions that once made them feel alive. They invest time in friendships, creativity, and personal goals. Gradually, their identity stops revolving entirely around the twin flame connection. Their happiness begins to grow again, independent of whether the other person is present. And something fascinating happens during this transformation. The emotional charge surrounding the connection begins to fade. Not because the love disappears, but because the desperation disappears. Instead of needing constant reassurance, they feel calm. Instead of fearing silence, they accept it. Instead of chasing signs, they focus on living their own life. And this shift sends a completely different energetic signal. Instead of saying, "I need you to feel okay," the energy now says, "I am okay whether you are here or not." Paradoxically, this is the exact moment when many twin flame connections begin to soften again. Because when the pressure disappears, space opens for genuine connection to return. The runner no longer feels overwhelmed. The chaser no longer feels desperate. The energy becomes balanced. But this transformation cannot be forced. You cannot pretend to let go while secretly hoping that letting go will bring them back. The shift must be real. It must come from a genuine realization that your life has meaning beyond the connection. This is why the twin flame journey often includes long periods of separation. Not as punishment, not as cosmic cruelty, but as an opportunity for both individuals to grow beyond emotional dependency. Separation creates space for self-discovery. It forces each person to confront the parts of themselves that were hidden behind the intensity of the connection. The fears, the insecurities, the beliefs about worthiness and love. And as these inner patterns are gradually healed, the energy of the connection evolves. The need begins to dissolve. The fear of loss begins to fade. The idea that another person must complete you begins to lose its power. What remains is something quieter, something steadier, a recognition that love does not require possession, that connection does not require control, that union, if it happens, must arise from freedom. And this brings us back to the central paradox of the twin flame journey. The moment you stop needing someone to complete you is the moment you become capable of meeting them as an equal. not as someone searching for rescue, not as someone seeking validation, but as someone who has discovered their own wholeness. And from that place of wholeness, a new kind of connection becomes possible. One that is not built on emotional survival, but on mutual choice. Because the most stable relationships in the world are not formed by two people who need each other to exist. They are formed by two people who could live full lives on their own and still choose to walk the path together. And when the energy of need finally dissolves, the twin flame connection no longer feels like something you must hold on to. It becomes something that can flow naturally, without fear, without pressure, without the desperate need to control the outcome. Only then does the possibility of true union begin to emerge. There is a moment in many twin flame journeys when the connection begins to feel like a puzzle that refuses to be solved. At the beginning, everything felt natural. The conversations were effortless. The emotional connection felt immediate and deep. There was a sense of familiarity that seemed to transcend time, as if the two of you had known each other long before this lifetime. Then something changes. The person who once seemed so present begins to pull away. Messages become less frequent. The energy shifts. The connection that once felt certain suddenly becomes unpredictable. And in that moment, many people react in the same way. They start chasing. They try to understand what went wrong. They search for explanations. They replay conversations in their minds, analyzing every detail. Did I say something wrong? Did I push them too hard? Are they losing feelings? The mind begins working overtime, trying to solve the mystery of the distance. And the more the other person withdraws, the more intense the chasing often becomes. You may try to reconnect through messages, hoping to bring the connection back to how it once felt. You may look for signs in numbers, dreams, or synchronicities, searching for reassurance that the bond is still there. You may even convince yourself that if you just say the right words, show the right emotions, or prove your devotion strongly enough, the connection will return to its original intensity. But here is the paradox. The more you chase union, the further union moves away. At first, this feels deeply unfair. After all, if the connection is real, shouldn't effort strengthen it? Shouldn't fighting for love be a good thing? In many ordinary relationships, effort does help maintain the bond. Communication, attention, and emotional presence are all important. But the twin flame dynamic operates on a deeper energetic level. And when chasing is driven by fear, it carries a hidden message beneath the actions. That message is, I am afraid of losing you. Fear, when expressed through pursuit, creates pressure. Even if you never directly say it, the energy of chasing often communicates something like, please don't leave me. I need this connection to survive. You are responsible for my happiness. And while those feelings may come from a place of genuine love and vulnerability, they create a weight inside the connection. The other person begins to feel that weight, sometimes without understanding why. They may still care about you. They may still feel the connection on a soul level. But the emotional intensity begins to feel overwhelming. It no longer feels like a free exchange of energy between two individuals. It begins to feel like an obligation. And when people feel emotionally obligated to maintain someone else's stability, their natural instinct is often to create distance. This is one of the most misunderstood parts of the twin flame journey. Many people believe that if they just try harder, show more love, or express their feelings more clearly, the other person will eventually recognize the depth of the connection and return. But the truth is that chasing rarely brings someone closer in this dynamic. Instead, it amplifies the imbalance between the two energies. One person becomes more invested, more emotionally focused on the connection. The other person feels increasingly pressured and begins to step further away. It becomes a cycle. The more one person moves forward, the more the other moves back. This dynamic can sometimes resemble a dance where the distance between the two partners never fully closes. And the reason this happens is not because one person loves more than the other. It is because the connection has lost its balance. Healthy energy in relationships flows freely. It is not forced. It is not pursued through desperation. It moves naturally between two people who feel safe being themselves. But chasing interrupts this natural flow. It introduces urgency, where there should be patience. It introduces fear, where there should be trust. It introduces pressure, where there should be freedom. And, ironically, the more you try to hold on to the connection, the more unstable it becomes. Imagine holding water in your hands. If you cup your hands gently, the water remains. But if you squeeze tightly, trying to control it, the water slips through your fingers. Connection works in much the same way. It thrives in openness. It disappears under pressure. The twin flame journey often forces people to learn this lesson in a very personal way. Because at some point, the chasing becomes exhausting. You may reach a stage where you realize that no matter how much effort you put into maintaining the connection, you cannot control the other person's choices. You cannot force them to stay. You cannot force them to recognize the connection. You cannot force them to grow at the same pace as you. And this realization can feel painful at first. It may feel like giving up. It may feel like losing something incredibly important. But in reality, it is the beginning of a powerful shift. Because when you stop chasing, something unexpected happens. You begin reclaiming your energy. All the emotional focus that was previously directed toward the other person begins returning to you. Instead of constantly monitoring the connection, you begin asking deeper questions about your own life. What do you truly want? What dreams have you postponed while waiting for the connection to stabilize? What parts of yourself have been neglected during the time you spent chasing someone else's attention? These questions mark the beginning of a new phase in the twin flame journey. A phase where the focus is no longer on controlling the connection, but on understanding yourself. And this shift does something remarkable to the energy of the relationship. The pressure begins to disappear. The urgency fades. The connection is no longer surrounded by the constant demand for reassurance. From an energetic perspective, this change is profound. Because instead of sending the message, "I need you," your energy begins saying something very different. "I choose myself." This does not mean you stop caring about the other person. It does not mean the love disappears. It simply means the connection is no longer the center of your emotional survival. Your life begins expanding again. Your identity grows beyond the relationship. And this expansion often creates a surprising effect. The distance between you and the other person no longer feels like a crisis. It becomes simply part of the journey. Ironically, this is often the moment when the dynamic begins to soften. Without the constant pressure of being chased, the runner may begin feeling safer reconnecting. Without the anxiety of losing the connection, the chaser begins experiencing peace. The energy between the two people starts moving naturally again. But the most important transformation happens inside you. Because when you stop chasing, you discover something that the earlier stages of the journey may have hidden. You discover that your life was never meant to revolve entirely around another person. Your soul has its own path. Your purpose extends far beyond a single relationship. And the twin flame journey, at its deepest level, is not about winning someone back. It is about learning how to stand fully in your own power. When that power returns, the connection becomes something entirely different. It is no longer a desperate pursuit. It becomes a quiet possibility. And that possibility can only exist when the chasing finally ends. Every twin flame journey eventually arrives at a quiet but powerful moment. A moment that often does not look dramatic from the outside, yet it changes everything internally. It is the moment when you begin to stop looking for them. For many people, the earlier stages of the journey are filled with constant searching. The mind becomes occupied with the connection almost every day. You look for signs in small things. Repeating numbers. Songs that suddenly appear at the right moment. Dreams that feel strangely vivid. You check your phone more often than usual, wondering if a message might appear. You replay memories of the connection, trying to understand what it all meant. You read articles, watch videos, or listen to spiritual discussions about twin flames, hoping to find confirmation that what you experienced was real. At first, this searching feels natural. After all, the connection may have felt unlike anything you had ever experienced before. It awakened emotions you did not even realize were inside you. It touched parts of your soul that ordinary relationships never reached. So it makes sense that you would want to understand it. You want to know why it happened. You want to know if it will return. You want to know if union is still possible. But as time passes, something subtle begins to change. The constant searching starts to feel exhausting. Not because the love disappears, but because the waiting becomes heavy. You realize that a large portion of your mental and emotional energy has been focused on a person who may not currently be present in your life. You begin to notice how much of your day revolves around thoughts of the connection. And slowly, a quiet question begins to emerge inside you. What about my life? It is a simple question, but it carries profound meaning. Because up until this point, the twin flame journey may have felt like a story about two people. But the truth is that the deeper story has always been about you, your growth, your healing, your rediscovery of who you are beyond the connection. This realization often marks the beginning of the turning point. It does not happen suddenly. It unfolds gradually. One day, you decide not to check their social media. Another day, you choose to spend time focusing on something that once made you feel alive. A hobby you had forgotten. A dream you had postponed. A goal you never fully pursued because your attention was elsewhere. At first, these small shifts may feel unfamiliar. For so long, the connection was the emotional center of your world. Letting go of that focus can feel like stepping into empty space. You may even worry that moving forward means you are abandoning the connection. But over time, something surprising begins to happen. Instead of feeling emptier, you start feeling lighter. The mental noise begins to quiet. The constant analysis of the past starts fading. Your attention slowly returns to the present moment. You begin noticing things that had been overlooked during the time you were deeply focused on the connection. The rhythm of your daily life. The people who are already part of your world. The small experiences that bring peace or joy. And in this process, you begin rediscovering a part of yourself that may have been forgotten. Your individuality. Before the twin flame connection appeared, you already had a life. You had interests, passions, curiosities, and dreams that existed independently of any relationship. But the intensity of the connection may have temporarily overshadowed those parts of your identity. Now, as you slowly reclaim your attention, those parts begin returning. You start remembering what it feels like to create something simply because it inspires you. To explore new opportunities without waiting for someone else's presence. To build a life that feels meaningful on its own. And this shift is not just psychological. It is energetic. Because the moment you stop searching for them to fill the center of your world, the energy surrounding the connection begins to change. Previously, your focus may have carried the quiet message. I need you in order to feel complete. But now, something different begins to emerge. A sense that your life is moving forward regardless of whether the connection is currently active. This does not erase the love. It does not deny the depth of what you experienced. It simply places the connection in a new context. Instead of being the foundation of your identity, it becomes one chapter in a much larger story. And that larger story belongs to you. Many people misunderstand this phase of the journey. They assume that letting go means the connection is over. But letting go is not the same as forgetting. It is not the same as denying what happened. Letting go simply means releasing the need to control the outcome. It means allowing the connection to exist without forcing it to define your entire life. And ironically, this is often the exact moment when the energy between twin flames begins to soften. Because the pressure disappears. The silent expectation that the other person must fulfill a role in your emotional world fades away. The connection is no longer surrounded by urgency. Instead, it becomes something that can breathe. Something that can evolve naturally rather than being held tightly by fear. But the most important transformation during this turning point happens within you. You begin discovering a form of peace that does not depend on whether someone else returns. You begin realizing that your worth was never determined by the presence or absence of a relationship. You begin feeling whole again. Not because someone else completed you, but because you remembered how to stand fully in your own life. This realization is powerful. It restores your sense of personal freedom. It allows you to pursue your purpose without waiting for external validation. And it changes the entire meaning of the twin flame journey. Because the journey was never meant to trap you in endless longing. It was meant to awaken you, to show you parts of yourself that had been hidden, to guide you back to your own strength. When you reach this turning point, the connection no longer feels like something you must chase. It becomes something you can simply acknowledge, a meaningful experience, a profound mirror, a catalyst for growth. And from this place of inner stability, something remarkable becomes possible. You are finally able to love without needing. You are finally able to appreciate the connection without depending on it. You are finally able to live your life fully, regardless of whether the other person is walking beside you. And this state of wholeness is exactly what the twin flame journey was quietly guiding you toward all along. Because only when you stop looking for someone else to complete your life can you fully begin living it. And paradoxically, that is the moment when the possibility of true union begins to reappear. Not as something you chase, but as something that can meet you naturally along the path you are already walking. There is a stage in the twin flame journey that many people do not expect, yet it becomes one of the most transformative phases of all. It is the moment when the focus of your life slowly shifts away from the connection and begins returning to you. At first, this shift can feel confusing. For so long, your thoughts may have revolved around the other person. The connection felt like the center of your emotional universe. Every sign, every silence, every unexpected message seemed to carry meaning. Your days may have been filled with questions. Are they thinking about me? Will we meet again? Is union still part of my path? But eventually something changes. The intensity of those questions begins to fade. Not because the connection was meaningless, not because you suddenly stop caring, but because your soul begins calling you back to something deeper. Your own life. For many people, this phase begins quietly. There is no dramatic announcement that says, "Now your healing begins." Instead, it unfolds through small realizations. You wake up one morning and notice that you did not check their social media the night before. You go through an entire afternoon without wondering what they are doing. You spend time with friends or family and realize that you felt genuinely present in the moment. These may seem like small changes, but they represent something profound. Your energy is returning to you. During the earlier stages of the twin flame journey, much of your emotional attention may have been directed outward, toward understanding the connection, interpreting the other person's behavior, and hoping for reunion. Now that attention begins to turn inward. And when it does, you begin rediscovering parts of yourself that may have been waiting quietly beneath the surface. Before the connection ever happened, you were already a complete individual. You had interests, dreams, talents, curiosities about the world. But the intensity of the twin flame connection may have temporarily overshadowed those aspects of your identity. Now they begin resurfacing. You may start reconnecting with hobbies that once made you feel alive. Maybe you return to writing, painting, music, or creative expression. Maybe you invest more time in your career or personal goals. Maybe you explore new experiences that expand your perspective. What matters is not the specific activity itself. What matters is the feeling behind it. The feeling that your life is once again moving forward. One of the most powerful realizations during this phase is that your happiness does not need to wait for someone else to return. This can feel surprising at first. For so long, it may have seemed like the resolution of the twin flame connection was the key to your emotional fulfillment. But as you begin living more fully again, you discover something important. Joy can exist independently of the connection. Peace can exist independently of the connection. Meaning can exist independently of the connection. This realization does not diminish the significance of what you experienced. If anything, it helps you understand it more clearly. The twin flame connection was never meant to become the entire foundation of your identity. It was meant to awaken you, to reflect aspects of your soul that had been waiting to emerge. But those qualities were always yours. They did not originate from the other person. They were activated by the connection, but they belong to you. And once you begin reclaiming those parts of yourself, the entire meaning of the journey begins to change. Instead of feeling like you are waiting for life to start again, you realize that life has been unfolding the entire time. You start appreciating your own growth, the emotional resilience you have developed, the self-awareness that emerged through the challenges of the journey. You begin recognizing that the connection pushed you to confront patterns that may have existed long before you ever met your twin flame. Patterns related to attachment, fear of abandonment, questions about self-worth. Through the intensity of the journey, these patterns came to the surface. And while that process may have felt painful, it also created an opportunity for healing. As you continue rediscovering yourself, another important shift occurs. Your relationship with the idea of union begins to evolve. Earlier in the journey, union may have felt like a destination, a moment in the future when everything would finally make sense. A moment when the separation would end and the connection would be fully realized. But as your life expands again, the urgency surrounding that destination begins to soften. Union no longer feels like the only path to happiness. Instead, it becomes a possibility. Something that could happen, but something that no longer defines your entire sense of purpose. This change in perspective is incredibly powerful because it frees you from the emotional pressure of waiting. It allows you to appreciate the connection without feeling trapped by it. You can hold the memory of what you experienced with gratitude rather than longing. You can recognize the impact it had on your life without needing to control what happens next. And when this level of inner balance begins to emerge, something interesting happens to your energy. You become more grounded, more stable, more present in your own life. The version of yourself that exists now is very different from the person who first encountered the twin flame connection. At the beginning, the intensity of the experience may have stirred confusion and emotional turbulence. Now there is a deeper understanding. You see the journey not as a romantic mystery that needs to be solved, but as a process of personal evolution. You understand that the most important transformation was never about bringing two people together. It was about bringing you back to yourself. This stage of rediscovery often brings a sense of freedom that many people did not expect to find within the twin flame journey. You realize that you are capable of building a meaningful life on your own terms. You realize that your identity is far larger than any single relationship. You realize that your purpose in this world extends beyond the story of the connection. And ironically, this freedom is exactly what prepares you for the possibility of real union. Because true union cannot exist between two people who feel lost without each other. It can only exist between two individuals who have discovered their own inner stability. Two people who no longer expect the other person to fill emotional gaps. Two people who choose connection from a place of abundance rather than lack. This is why rediscovering yourself is not a distraction from the twin flame journey. It is the heart of it. Every step you take toward your own growth strengthens the foundation for whatever future the connection may hold. Whether that future includes reunion or simply a deep sense of closure, the transformation you experience within yourself remains the most valuable part of the entire journey. Because the greatest gift the twin flame connection can offer is not the promise of union. It is the awakening of your own soul. And once that awakening begins, your life expands in ways that no single relationship could ever contain. You begin walking your path not as someone waiting to be completed, but as someone who has rediscovered their own wholeness. And from that place of wholeness, every connection in your life, including the one that started this journey, takes on an entirely new meaning. At some point in the twin flame journey, a paradox begins to reveal itself. It is a truth that can feel confusing at first, almost contradictory to everything the heart believes about love and connection. The paradox is this. The moment you stop holding on so tightly to the idea of union is often the moment when union finally becomes possible. To understand why this happens, we need to look closely at what it really means to hold on. In the earlier stages of the twin flame journey, holding on often feels like devotion. It feels like loyalty to something sacred. After all, when a connection touches the deepest layers of your soul, letting go can seem almost impossible. You may tell yourself that if the connection is truly meant to happen, you must keep believing in it. You must keep focusing on it. You must keep waiting for the moment when everything finally comes together. But sometimes holding on does not actually come from love. Sometimes it comes from fear. Fear that if you release your grip on the connection, it might disappear forever. Fear that if you stop thinking about them, the bond might weaken. Fear that if you move forward with your life, you might somehow betray the significance of what you experienced. These fears can be powerful, and they often keep people emotionally attached to the connection long after the dynamic has become painful or stagnant. Yet the twin flame journey has a way of guiding people toward a deeper realization. Eventually, the constant tension of holding on begins to feel exhausting. You realize that no amount of thinking, analyzing, or waiting can control what another person chooses to do. You cannot force them to awaken. You cannot force them to return. You cannot force the timing of the universe. And when this realization finally sinks in, something inside you begins to soften. Not because you have stopped caring, but because you have stopped trying to control the outcome. This is the true beginning of letting go. Letting go does not mean forgetting the connection. It does not mean pretending it never mattered. And it certainly does not mean denying the love that may still exist in your heart. Letting go simply means releasing the need to control what happens next. It means allowing life to unfold without trying to force a specific ending. For many people, this stage feels both peaceful and unsettling at the same time. Peaceful because the constant mental pressure begins to fade. Unsettling because the future of the connection becomes uncertain. You are no longer gripping the story tightly. You are allowing space for life to move in its own direction. And that space is exactly where transformation begins. When you release the tight emotional attachment to a specific outcome, your energy changes in a profound way. Instead of constantly projecting your attention toward the other person, your awareness returns to the present moment. You become more engaged with your own life. Your daily experiences start feeling more meaningful. You rediscover the sense of freedom that may have been overshadowed by the intensity of the connection. And something else happens during this shift. Your relationship with love itself begins to evolve. Earlier in the journey, love may have felt like something fragile, something that required constant attention and reassurance in order to survive. But as you let go of the need to control the connection, you begin realizing that genuine love does not disappear simply because you stop chasing it. Real love exists without force. It exists without manipulation. It exists without constant effort to prove its validity. It simply exists. This realization can feel liberating because it allows you to trust the depth of what you experienced without needing to constantly confirm it. The connection becomes something you can hold gently rather than tightly. And when you hold something gently, you allow it to breathe. This is where the paradox of letting go becomes clear. When you stop gripping the connection with fear, the energetic pressure surrounding it begins to dissolve. The runner no longer feels the weight of being pursued. The chaser no longer feels the anxiety of losing something essential. The dynamic begins to rebalance itself. From an energetic perspective, letting go sends a powerful message. It communicates that your happiness does not depend entirely on the outcome of the connection. It communicates that your life continues to move forward. It communicates that you respect both your own path and the other person's path, even if they do not currently align. This energy creates space. And space is one of the most important ingredients for authentic connection. Without space, relationships become suffocating. Without space, people feel trapped rather than inspired. But when space exists, something different can happen. Both individuals have room to grow, room to reflect, room to evolve into the versions of themselves capable of sustaining a deeper connection. Sometimes this growth leads the two people back toward each other. Sometimes it leads them onto completely different paths. But either way, the journey moves forward with greater clarity and peace. One of the most powerful realizations during this stage is that letting go does not erase the connection. If anything, it often strengthens the spiritual bond, because the connection is no longer tangled in layers of expectation and emotional pressure. It becomes something quieter, something more mature, something rooted in mutual freedom rather than emotional survival. You may still think about the other person occasionally. Certain memories may still bring warmth to your heart, but the thoughts no longer carry the same intensity of longing. They become gentle acknowledgments of a shared experience rather than constant reminders of something missing. This transformation allows you to live more fully in the present. Your energy expands beyond the boundaries of the connection. You begin focusing on the opportunities and relationships that exist in your life right now. And paradoxically, this is often the moment when the twin flame dynamic shifts in unexpected ways. Because when the chasing stops, the energetic imbalance disappears. The connection is no longer defined by one person pursuing and the other withdrawing. Both individuals stand in their own space. Both individuals are free. And from that freedom, something new can emerge. Perhaps it is reunion. Perhaps it is deeper understanding. Perhaps it is simply peace. Whatever the outcome may be, the journey has already fulfilled one of its most important purposes. It has taught you how to love without attachment, how to care without control, how to trust the unfolding of life without trying to force it into a specific shape. This is the true power hidden within the paradox of letting go. Because the moment you release the need for union to happen, you become energetically ready for it. Not because you have stopped caring, but because you have discovered something even more important than the connection itself. You have discovered your own freedom. And from that place of freedom, love can finally exist in its most authentic form. When people first hear about twin flame union, they often imagine something dramatic and extraordinary. They picture a moment when two people who have been separated by time, distance, and emotional confusion finally come back together. There is a powerful conversation, tears, apologies, and the realization that the connection was always meant to be. In this version of the story, everything suddenly makes sense. All the pain of separation becomes justified. The years of longing lead to a perfect reunion where both people finally recognize their destiny. It sounds beautiful, but the reality of true twin flame union is usually far quieter than the fantasy. In fact, many people would not even recognize it at first. Because real union is not defined by dramatic emotion or overwhelming intensity. It is defined by balance. And balance often feels calm rather than explosive. One of the biggest misunderstandings about twin flame union is the idea that it is the ultimate romantic completion, that when two twin flames come together, they will automatically feel constant passion, excitement, and emotional intensity. But the truth is that union is not about returning to the emotional turbulence that often exists during separation. It is about moving beyond it. During the earlier phases of the twin flame journey, the connection may feel chaotic at times. There are moments of closeness followed by sudden distance. Moments of deep emotional understanding followed by confusion. The dynamic often swings between extremes. This instability is not random. It reflects the inner imbalance that both individuals are still working through. Each person is facing their own fears, wounds, and beliefs about love. And until those internal patterns begin to heal, the connection cannot fully stabilize. That is why the path toward union requires personal transformation. Not just emotional awareness, but genuine growth. Both individuals must reach a point where they no longer approach the relationship from a place of need. They must develop the ability to stand independently in their own lives. Only then can the connection evolve into something stable. When true union finally begins to form, the energy between the two people feels very different from the intensity of the early stages. Instead of urgency, there is patience. Instead of emotional volatility, there is calm. Instead of chasing and running, there is mutual presence. Both individuals are capable of respecting each other's independence. There is no constant fear of losing the connection. There is no pressure to prove love through dramatic gestures or emotional extremes. The relationship feels natural, effortless. Not because it requires no communication or effort, but because the energy between the two people flows smoothly. Another important aspect of real twin flame union is the absence of emotional dependency. Earlier in the journey, one or both people may have believed that the relationship was necessary for their happiness. They may have felt incomplete without the other person. But in true union, that belief disappears. Both individuals have discovered their own sense of wholeness. They have learned how to create fulfillment within themselves. This does not make the connection less meaningful. In fact, It makes it far more powerful, because the relationship is no longer built on emotional survival. It is built on conscious choice. Two people who could live complete lives independently choose to share part of their journey together. This kind of connection carries a sense of freedom. Neither person feels trapped. Neither person feels responsible for fixing the other's emotional wounds. Instead, the relationship becomes a space where both individuals can continue growing. Another surprising characteristic of real twin flame union is simplicity. The early stages of the journey often feel mysterious and complicated. People search for signs, synchronicities, and spiritual messages. They wonder if every encounter carries hidden meaning. But when union stabilizes, much of that complexity disappears. The relationship becomes grounded in everyday life. Two people spending time together, sharing conversations, supporting each other's goals, facing challenges as partners rather than adversaries. The connection still carries depth, but it is expressed through stability rather than intensity. This simplicity can feel surprising to those who expected union to be a constant spiritual experience filled with extraordinary moments. In reality, the extraordinary aspect of union is the sense of peace it brings. For the first time in the journey, the connection no longer feels like a problem that needs solving. It simply exists, and that existence feels natural. There is also a deep level of respect within true twin flame union. Both individuals recognize that the journey required significant personal growth. They understand that the separation phases were not meaningless suffering. They were opportunities for transformation. Because of this awareness, neither person takes the relationship for granted. They appreciate the path that brought them together. They respect the independence that each person developed during the time apart. This mutual respect creates a foundation of trust. Trust that does not depend on constant reassurance. Trust that allows both individuals to continue evolving without fear that personal growth will threaten the relationship. Another important aspect of union is emotional maturity. During earlier phases, conflicts may have been fueled by insecurity or misunderstanding. In union, communication becomes more open and balanced. Both people are willing to listen. Both people are capable of expressing their needs without blame. Disagreements may still occur. After all, they are human. But those disagreements do not threaten the stability of the connection. Instead, they become opportunities for deeper understanding. Perhaps the most beautiful part of true twin flame union is the sense of shared purpose that often emerges. When two individuals have completed significant inner work, they naturally begin asking larger questions about their lives. What do we want to create together? How can our connection contribute something meaningful to the world? For some couples, this purpose may take the form of creative collaboration. For others, it may simply mean building a life that supports mutual growth and compassion. The specific path is different for every pair, but the underlying principle remains the same. Union is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of a new phase. A phase where two awakened individuals walk side by side rather than searching for each other from opposite ends of separation. And perhaps the most important realization about twin flame union is this. It does not happen because one person finally convinced the other to return. It happens because both individuals reached a level of inner alignment where the connection could exist without pressure. Union is not forced. It is allowed. It emerges naturally when the emotional chaos of the earlier stages has transformed into stability, when the need for completion has been replaced by a sense of personal wholeness, when love is no longer driven by fear of loss. Instead, it flows from freedom. And that freedom is what makes real twin flame unions so different from the romantic fantasy many people imagine. It is not the moment when two broken halves finally become whole. It is the moment when two whole individuals recognize that their paths can move forward together. Not because they must, but because they choose to.
Viết chi tiết chương 9 bằng tiếng Anh, viết dài hơn khoảng 1.000 từ.
Chapter 9. The Paradox of Letting Go. There is a paradox at the heart of the twin flame journey that many people struggle to understand. It's a truth that feels almost unfair at first. The moment you truly stop needing your twin flame is often the moment the possibility of union finally appears. Not when you are desperate, not when you are waiting, Not when your happiness depends on them returning, but when you are free. This paradox confuses many people on the twin flame path, because from the outside, it can feel contradictory. You love someone deeply. You feel a connection that seems destined. Yet the more you chase, the further they seem to go.
Why?
Because twin flame union is not built on dependency. It is built on energetic wholeness. And dependency, no matter how romantic it may seem, creates pressure. The energy of needing versus the energy of being. When you need someone, the energy you emit is subtle but powerful. It says, I am incomplete without you. My happiness depends on you. I cannot feel whole unless you return. Even if you never say these words aloud, this emotional state becomes part of your energetic field. And energy speaks louder than words. Needing someone places them on a pedestal, while placing yourself in a position of lack. It creates an imbalance. One person becomes the source of love, meaning, and validation. But twin flames are mirrors. They are not meant to complete you. They are meant to reveal you. So, when the connection becomes rooted in emotional dependency, the mirror reflects exactly that, your unresolved wounds around abandonment, worthiness, and self-love. This is why separation often happens. Not as punishment, but as a catalyst. Why separation creates growth. Separation in the twin flame journey is one of the most misunderstood stages. Many people see it as failure. But in truth, separation is often the sacred space where transformation begins. When your twin flame is no longer physically present, something profound happens. You are left alone with yourself. There is no one to distract you from your emotions. No one to validate your identity. No one to confirm your worth. And this is where the real work begins. Because, without realizing it, many people begin the twin flame journey hoping their counterpart will fill emotional gaps they have carried for years. The need for reassurance. The fear of abandonment. The desire to feel chosen. These wounds don't disappear inside a relationship. They become amplified. The twin flame connection acts like a spotlight, illuminating every hidden insecurity. So when separation occurs, the spotlight turns inward. The question becomes,
Who are you without them?
the moment the search stops. There is a turning point in many twin flame journeys. It doesn't always arrive dramatically. Sometimes it happens quietly. After months or even years of emotional ups and downs, something inside you shifts. You grow tired of waiting. You grow tired of analyzing every sign, every message, every silence. You grow tired of putting your life on hold. And in that moment, something unexpected happens. You begin to choose yourself. Not because you stopped loving them, but because you realize you deserve a life that continues, whether they return or not. You start pursuing your passions again. You rebuild friendships. You reconnect with your dreams. You rediscover parts of yourself that were forgotten during the emotional intensity of the journey. And slowly, the center of your universe moves. It no longer revolves around them. It revolves around you. This is where the paradox begins. From the outside, it might look like you have moved on. But internally, something much deeper has happened. You have reclaimed your energy. You are no longer searching for your twin flame to validate your existence. You no longer need their presence to feel complete. And this is the paradox. Because twin flame union becomes possible only when both individuals stand in their own wholeness. Not when one person is chasing. Not when one person is emotionally dependent. But when both have reached a level of inner stability where the relationship becomes a choice, not a necessity. Union is not about two incomplete people finding salvation in each other. It is about two whole individuals choosing connection without losing themselves. Why letting go is not giving up. Many people fear that letting go means abandoning the connection. They worry that if they stop thinking about their twin flame, stop waiting, stop hoping, then the connection will disappear. But letting go does not erase the bond. Letting go simply removes the attachment that creates suffering. Love can still exist without obsession. Connection can still exist without control. Letting go means you release the outcome. You stop trying to force timing. You stop trying to orchestrate how and when reunion should happen. Instead, you allow life to unfold naturally. This shift from control to trust changes everything. The magnetic shift. Something fascinating happens when you truly reach this place of inner peace. Your energy becomes lighter. You are no longer radiating longing or emotional pressure. Instead, you radiate calm confidence. You are living your life fully. And paradoxically, this is when the energetic dynamic between twin flames often begins to shift. Because when one twin stops chasing, the mirror changes. The emotional space that once triggered avoidance now becomes safe. The pressure disappears. And sometimes, unexpectedly, communication returns. Not always, but often enough that many people on the journey begin to recognize the pattern. Union tends to appear when attachment dissolves. A simple analogy. Imagine trying to hold water tightly in your hands. The harder you squeeze, the faster it slips through your fingers. But if you relax your hands and allow them to remain open, the water can rest there naturally. Twin flame union works in a similar way. The more you try to control it, chase it, or force it, the more resistance you create. But when you release the need to possess the outcome, the connection is finally able to breathe. And in that space, something new can emerge. The question that changes everything. So, here is a powerful question to reflect on. If your twin flame never returned, would you still be able to live a full and meaningful life? For many people, the honest answer at the beginning of the journey is no. But over time, that answer changes. Because the journey itself transforms you. You begin to realize that the true purpose of the twin flame path was never just reunion. It was awakening. Awakening to your own worth. Awakening to your own strength. Awakening to the realization that the love you were searching for was never meant to come only from another person. It was always meant to begin within you. The hidden gift of the journey. And when that realization finally settles in your heart, something beautiful happens. You are no longer waiting to be completed. You are no longer searching for someone to rescue you from loneliness. Instead, you're standing fully in your own life. Your joy becomes self-generated. Your identity becomes self-defined. Your peace becomes self-sustained. At that point, if your twin flame returns, the connection becomes something entirely different. Not a rescue, not a dependency, but a meeting of equals. Two souls who have done the inner work. Two people who choose each other freely. And that kind of love is not fragile. It is stable. It is conscious. It is real. The truth most people discover too late. The irony is that many people spend years trying to achieve union by focusing on their twin flame. But the real path was always somewhere else. The path was inward. Union does not arrive when you finally convince them to stay. It arrives when you no longer need them to. Because at that moment, you have already become whole. And that wholeness is the very frequency where true union can finally exist. In the next chapter, we will explore something even deeper. What actually happens energetically when both twin flames reach the state of inner completeness, and why this alignment often triggers reunion in the most unexpected ways. If this message resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on your own journey. And if you are walking the twin flame path right now, remember this. Sometimes the most powerful step toward union is the moment you stop chasing it. There is a moment on the twin flame journey that many people do not expect. It does not arrive with fireworks. It does not come with a dramatic sign from the universe. Instead, it appears quietly, almost unnoticed. It is the moment when you finally realize that your life no longer revolves around the idea of union. For a long time, the journey may have felt like a constant emotional storm. Thoughts about your twin flame appeared every day. Questions filled your mind. Where are they? Are they thinking about me? Will we ever reunite? You may have searched for signs in repeating numbers, dreams, or sudden memories that felt too intense to ignore. But then something shifts. Slowly, gently, your focus changes. You begin to wake up thinking about your own life instead of theirs. Your plans no longer depend on whether they return. Your happiness is no longer postponed for a future reunion. You begin living again. And ironically, this is often the moment when the deeper energetic alignment between twin flames begins. When two individuals become whole. The ultimate purpose of the twin flame journey is not simply romantic union. It is personal evolution. Every stage of the journey, meeting, separation, longing, confusion, healing, serves one primary purpose: to guide both individuals back to themselves. Many people enter the connection with unconscious expectations. They hope the relationship will solve something inside them: loneliness, insecurity, fear of abandonment, or the deep human desire to feel chosen. But the twin flame path dismantles those expectations. It forces both people to confront their own inner worlds. The runner often withdraws because the intensity exposes emotional wounds they are not ready to face. The chaser often pursues because the connection awakens unresolved fears of loss and rejection. Both sides are reacting from pain. But over time, if the journey unfolds as it is meant to, something powerful happens. Healing begins. The chaser learns to stop chasing. The runner learns to stop running. And slowly, each individual begins to stand on their own emotional foundation. This is when the possibility of true union begins to appear. Not because the connection suddenly changed, but because the people within it have changed. The energetic balance that makes union possible. Twin flame union is often described as a spiritual alignment. But what does that actually mean? At its core, union requires balance. In the early stages of the journey, the energetic dynamic between twin flames is often uneven. One person gives more. One person withdraws. One person waits while the other resists. This imbalance creates tension. It keeps the relationship stuck in cycles of longing, separation, and emotional turbulence. But when both individuals grow, when both confront their fears and heal their wounds, the energy begins to stabilize. The connection no longer feels like a battle between closeness and distance. Instead, it becomes something calmer, more grounded, more conscious. This is the stage where union can finally exist without collapsing under emotional pressure. Because the relationship is no longer carrying the burden of unhealed trauma. It is supported by two people who have already learned how to stand alone. A different kind of love. When union happens after this transformation, the relationship feels very different from the early stages of the connection. The intensity may still exist, but it is no longer chaotic. There is space. There is respect. There is emotional maturity. Instead of trying to possess one another, both individuals allow each other to grow. Instead of seeking validation, they offer support. Instead of fearing separation, they trust the connection. This kind of love is not built on desperation. It is built on freedom. And freedom creates stability. Because when two people choose each other without needing each other, the relationship becomes stronger rather than fragile. It is no longer driven by fear of loss. It is guided by conscious choice. Why union often happens unexpectedly. One of the most fascinating aspects of the twin flame journey is that union often occurs when it is least expected. After years of emotional processing, healing, and letting go, many people reach a point where they no longer obsess over the idea of reunion. They may still feel love for their twin flame, but that love becomes peaceful rather than consuming. And then something unexpected happens. A message arrives. A chance meeting occurs. Communication resumes after a long period of silence. It can feel almost surreal, because the moment you stopped chasing the connection was the moment the energy finally became open enough for it to return. This does not mean union happens for everyone. Every journey is unique. But the pattern appears often enough that many people begin to recognize it as a natural stage of the path. The real meaning of union. Many people imagine union as a fairy tale ending. A moment where two souls finally reunite and live happily ever after. But in reality, union is not an ending. It is the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where both individuals continue to grow, not only as partners, but as independent beings. The connection becomes a space where both people can evolve together. Challenges may still appear. Life will still bring change, uncertainty, and unexpected turns. But the relationship no longer depends on emotional survival. It becomes a conscious partnership, a shared journey. And this is the form of union that lasts. not because it is perfect, but because it is built on emotional responsibility rather than emotional dependency. The deeper lesson behind the journey. Looking back, many people eventually realize something surprising about the twin flame path. The real transformation was never about the other person. It was about you. The sleepless nights, the intense emotions, the periods of separation, each stage forced you to confront aspects of yourself that might otherwise have remained hidden. You learned how to heal your own wounds. You learned how to love yourself more deeply. You learned how to live without needing someone else to define your worth. And in doing so, you became a different person. Stronger, more aware, more emotionally independent. Whether union happens or not, this transformation is the true gift of the journey. Because once you reach this level of self-awareness, every relationship in your life changes. You no longer tolerate connections built on imbalance. You no longer sacrifice your identity to keep someone close. You begin choosing relationships that reflect the respect and love you have learned to give yourself. The final realization. At the beginning of the twin flame journey, many people believe the ultimate goal is reunion. But by the time they reach the later stages of the path, their perspective often shifts. They begin to understand that the journey was never just about finding their twin flame.
It was about finding themselves.
Union, if it happens, becomes a beautiful extension of that inner transformation. But the real victory is not the relationship. The real victory is the person you become along the way. A message for those still on the path. If you are currently walking the twin flame journey, there may be days when it feels confusing or even painful. You may question whether the connection is real. You may wonder if the waiting will ever end. But remember this. Your life is not meant to pause while you search for union. Your life is happening now. The more you invest in your own growth, your own happiness, and your own purpose, the more aligned you become with the deeper intention of the journey. And whether your twin flame returns or not, you will have gained something far more valuable. You will have discovered your own wholeness. The paradox of the twin flame path is simple, yet profound. Union does not happen when you finally convince someone to stay. Union becomes possible when you no longer need them to. When love flows from completeness rather than lack. When connection becomes a choice rather than a necessity. That is the frequency where real union exists. And the moment you reach that place within yourself, you may realize that the journey was guiding you there all along. If this message resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on your own twin flame journey. Have you experienced the paradox of letting go? Are you learning to live fully with or without reunion? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to explore more insights about the twin flame journey, self-discovery, and spiritual growth, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video. Your journey is unique, but you are not walking it alone.
Thank you for spending this moment with me. If this message resonated with your soul, remember to subscribe and continue this journey with us here on Twin Flame Journey. And always remember, what is meant for your soul will always find its way back to you.